Today we have Craig Escamilla. He's the executive director from the Symphony in Southeast Texas, and he's been there since August 2007. He's also an adjunct instructor here at Lamar University, and he also provides consulting and coaching services with an emphasis on strategic planning, nonprofit governance, and personal productivity. And he maintains an active schedule as a performer and adjudicator and guest speaker and lecturer. He's a native of Beaumont, Texas, and he's a graduate of Lamar University with a Master's of Business Administration and a Bachelor of Music degrees.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to be here this afternoon. I, based on that bio, I don't know what I know about resumes and interviews, but no, I'm just kidding. We will explore some of that today. We'll talk a little bit about productivity as well. So I need to start, I need a volunteer. It's the afternoon. You don't know what I'm going to do you? But I'm going to do something. All right, come on down here. Okay. You can have this nice stool. Was purchased when John Gray was the president. You can sit on the stool. Yes, sir. Okay, so, do you have a job? Or what's your name?
My name is Jacob Martin.
Jacob, great, nice to meet you. Okay. So, Jacob, do you have a job right now?
I don't.
Are you looking for a job? Okay, if you're looking for one, actually. Yeah, right. Okay, so I'm going to interview Jacob real quick, okay? So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. So, tell me a little bit about yourself. Okay, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I don't like to project your life, okay? I'm a Merit Scholar here at the school. I work in high school. I go to class a lot and study a lot.
Okay. So, let's say that you are applying for a job here at Lamar in the Career Testing Center.
Okay.
Why are you interested in this job?
Because I need to make money.
Okay, very good. What else?
I would probably pick a job that I'd care to have.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so why does this one interest you?
I don't know what we're talking about, so I can't tell you that.
Okay. All right, so let me ask you another question. Tell me about your greatest accomplishment ever.
Probably getting the scholarship for Lamar.
Okay.
Because that saved me a whole lot of money and my parents a whole lot of money.
Okay. Tell me about what you think is your greatest weakness.
Pride.
Can you elaborate a little bit?
Having to win an argument at the expense of hurting someone else's feelings or losing respect from other people.
How do you think that might be a negative in this job?
It depends if you need me to be right or not. I mean, if there's a rule and they're trying to break it, then I'm going to be right to keep my job in line.
Sorry, go ahead.
But if it comes to, just opinion, then I'd hold back because it's a job and that's not required.
Okay, so there's a side note here. This guy's a really good interviewer, right? Okay, so already, right, if he really, knew the job and was interviewing, he's doing a pretty good job here, okay, especially for being thrown on the spot. Very good. And one last question, and then you can take your seat again. Do you have any questions for me?
Why are you the guy interviewing?
Okay. All right, answer that question. I asked the questions. All right, thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause. Okay, so I wanted to start with this sample because I wanted to give you a feel of what the job interview process is like. Because everything that we do before we get to the interview builds up to the interview. But the interview is the moment at which we have been sort of accepted, and we might actually get this job. And so then we have to do the convincing, right? And so we'll get into that as we go today. So we're going to start, give you an overview here. We're going to start by talking about resumes and logistically talking about resumes, how to assemble a resume, what it should look like, what it should contain, and some of those things. Then we'll talk a little bit about the cover letter, what the purpose of the cover letter is, and how to write an effective one that might actually get you to the interview. Then we'll talk about, assuming that you've gotten an interview, how you should present yourself for the interview. Okay? And then we'll talk about the interview itself. We'll look at some of these sample questions. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about organization because, having some organization and productivity skills is what's going to help you go through these other things. All right, so let's get started. So let's talk about the resume. I like Dilbert for business, so here's Dilbert. Good. All right. So resumes. All right, so you're going to see some samples from my actual resume, minus, personal information that's been removed. Okay, so what's the first thing that we see up here? We see some contact information. Who am I, right? My name. Okay. Some contact information that's permanent is very important also, right? So, for example, you live in a dorm right now. You're probably not going to live in the dorm forever, right? So you might want some permanent contact information for mailing. Maybe your parents' address, your original home address, okay? Someplace that's going to be stable for a while. Okay? You also want a phone number that you can actually be reached at. That's going to be very important. And a lot of times, yes, we cannot reach people who have applied for jobs because their phone number is not accurate or is no longer good on their resume. Okay, so that's very important. And we want a good email address, and we'll talk about that right now. These are not good email addresses, okay? These are not good email addresses. They're nice, I guess. They're not appropriate for a resume or a professional setting, okay? So if you have an email address that looks something like this, my suggestion to you would be that you consider creating a new one. Most of them are free. Okay? Gmail is free. All right, and so you might want something like this, or something like this. I'm going to put several samples up here. The point here is that these all have more professional tone to them. Not only do they have a more professional tone to them, but they also include something about my name, right? So that I can sort of keep track of this person versus all the other applicants that I have for a job if I'm the hiring manager. And they also are simple, sort of easy to remember, minus the fact that my last name is a little bit complicated, okay? So, very simple, straightforward, professional email address. If you want to keep your fun email address, keep your fun email address. But have a professional one that you check for this type of situation. Okay, so now let's get into the content. What is on a resume? Because this is what's going to set you apart. So I realize it's kind of small, but I wanted to give you a good overview of things. So you can see up here a lot of professional experience that I've had. I really did have this professional experience, okay? It's not made up. And you can see how I've prioritized some of these things, right? So to me, the single most important thing that I've done in my professional life is serve as the executive director of the symphony. Okay? That is the highest level position that I have attained in anything that I've done. Okay? But in order to add to certain experiential or professional credentials, I want to put some other things up there as well. Okay? So I have that I teach here, because that's important, especially for the third one, if somebody wants to hire me as a consultant. It's really nice that they know that I teach and that I've had longevity as an administrator. Why do I have these other two up here? Well, two reasons. The one that says I was a church choir accompanist is important if you look at the dates. How long? 10 years, right? What does that tell a hiring manager? You're probably not going to lose me. I'm a fairly dedicated person. Social. Who said that and what did you mean? Oh, I see. Okay. Okay, good. All right. So, but the idea here is that it's a long-term commitment, okay? And you'll notice that about the big jobs up here, okay? The other one at the bottom, the previous position that I held at the symphony, why is this important? Because it also demonstrates, if you take it in context with the executive director position, some tenure, some long-term commitment as well. Okay? So what we want to establish is a pattern so that people can see if I hire this person, they're not using this job as a stepping stone. Right? They're not just going to take this job, work here for a couple of weeks, couple of months, couple of years, and then move on to something else. Because hiring people costs a lot of money for organizations. Right? Turnover costs money because there's nobody doing the work. Okay? All right, good. Also want to establish education information. Notice that I don't give, my GPA and all that stuff. Did I give that when I first graduated? Of course I did, because that was valuable information because I didn't have a lot of professional experience. Okay? But now, I don't even know what they were, nor do I care, nor does anyone else care at this point. Okay? And then I have another section here. So what are the sections that we would generally have? Generally, in a professional resume, you would want to start with professional experience. Okay? That would be the first thing. Then you would want to have education history. Okay? Then, if appropriate, if it's something that's important to your field, you would probably do some publications, presentations, things that, again, continue to establish you as some type of expert or with some level of experience in the field. Okay? Then you also want to have things like honors, awards that you've received. Okay? Those things are important. They show that you've made progress or had significant achievements. And you also want to have a section that talks about professional memberships or affiliations, organizations that you're involved in, right? So I'm a member of the Rotary Club. I'm actually a member of the Rotary Club's board, the Rotary Club of Beaumont. Okay? And there are other board memberships that I'm on. You could space those things out into different things. You know, you kind of have to use your judgment there. If you're on a lot of organizations' boards, you know, at some point in your future, then you could have board memberships. Okay? So some of these things, you know, you just have to use your judgment. The most important thing here is consistency. Consistency. Okay? Consistency in the way you list things. Consistency in the style, the format. Okay? All of those things are really important. We're looking at that when we're hiring people. Another thing that's really important is using spell check, right? Okay. Make sure that you've proofread this. What's the best way to proofread something? Print it out and read it. Print it out and read it. We miss things on the screen. Get a red pen, go right through and make marks. Okay, good. All right, so again, emphasizing consistency. Before we move away from this part of the resume, let's talk about education versus work experience. How many of you have a lot of significant work experience right now in your life? Okay, so not very many people, right? How many of you have what you would consider somewhat significant education experience right now? You're here, right? Okay, so the majority of you should be in that group, whether you raise your hand or not. Okay, so the key here is that when you're graduating or when you're in school and looking for a job, you know, those first few jobs, you probably need to emphasize that education section first. Why? Because that's what shows some tenure, some stick-to-itness, some longevity for you, right? That you have decided to go to college, or that you've decided to go to graduate school. I don't know if we probably don't have any graduate students here, but that you've decided to make that commitment, okay? That's important. You might list your GPA here also if it's something that you're proud of and thinks adds to your credibility. Eventually, though, you will establish enough professional experience that that will become the most important section of your resume. That should be first, okay? All right. Questions so far? Okay, there'll be time for lots of questions later. All right. Another thing that's a little bit trendy right now, okay, is an attachment or an addendum or a second page or an additional section to your resume that talks about career accomplishments. Okay? So what are some of the things that you've done in your career? They may not all be at the same job, right? But what are some of the significant accomplishments that you have had? So why is this important? If you list jobs that you've had, you don't want to describe what you did at that job, right? I don't need to describe executive director of the symphony orchestra to people. Most people understand that means I was the top manager of a nonprofit organization, essentially. Okay? Most people, most hiring managers will understand that. But I would like them to know some of these things because I'm pretty darn proud of some of these. Okay? And they establish some degree of experience and expertise that sets me apart from other people. Okay? Not bragging. That's the reason that you use this. The other thing that's really nice about this is really great to be able to sort of look back over the things you've accomplished and, you know, feel good about yourself and go into annual evaluations and that kind of thing. You know, that's fun too. All right? So, what if you don't have a lot of career accomplishments? Well, the sort of subset of that, or the other way to do that, is to have a functional skills section. Okay? So things that you have expertise in or that you feel really comfortable doing something in. Maybe you're really good with IT. Maybe you're really good with accounting, okay? Or something of that effect. So you would have then a functional skills section. The only time that you would ever really describe the duties of your job in the jobs listing on your resume is if it was something unusual. Okay? If there was an unusual responsibility or experience that you had, you would always want to list that because that may be something that sets you apart from the rest of the applicants. The other thing about these career accomplishments is notice what type of word do they all begin with? A verb, right, action, exactly. They all begin with a verb. Very important piece of information. So we begin these things with a verb. All right, so let's talk about the last section of a resume, which is the references section. I'll add this in there first. Not much left on this one. All right. So, couple of things about references. And the dean is here, and I appreciate that he's here. I didn't want him to have him on here, but he's the board president of the symphony, so he gets to be listed. Okay, so none of this information is accurate, so don't try to contact him this way. Okay. The first and most important thing would be to do not do what I just did, which is don't list a reference without asking their permission. Okay. Make sure that they know, because what's just about the worst thing in the world that could happen to you if you were applying for a job? The hiring manager calls your reference, and your reference says, "Oh, I didn't know he was applying for that job. Let me tell you what I know about him." Right? That tells us a lot right away about this person's abilities, about what they're doing, how their professionalism works. Okay? All right. So what kind of stuff do we want? Well, we want to know who this person is relative to us. So the most important thing first here is that he's my immediate boss right now, right? He's the board president. I answer to him. Then we also want to know who he is. What establishes his credentials? Well, he's the dean of the College of Business, okay, at Lamar University. And then we want, again, complete, current, permanent, accurate contact information for that person. And you should probably use professional contact information, because hiring managers probably are not going to call you references during the evening at home. Okay? We did a couple of seasons of music director searches, hiring a conductor at the symphony. And we had a couple of conductors who, of course, in an effort to sort of show us how wonderful they were, listed some very established and successful and high-level conductors in the field as their references. This was kind of a pain, right? Because nobody really wanted to call some of these really respected and established conductors and say, "Hey, can we talk about so-and-so for a few minutes?" Right? Because their schedules were at such a high level that it was like nobody wanted to disturb them. So think about the references that you choose. The reference sections is not really the place to show off. It's the place to show off people who can speak at the highest level about you. And I'll go ahead and give you this warning because it's 100% true. We did it. I'm sure that they do it here at Lamar. This is 100% true. If I know somebody who knows you that you don't list as a reference, I'm calling that person. Because they're going to tell me what I really need to know about you. Okay? So, what's the point there? It goes back to this, right? Must not burn bridges. You never know who knows whom and who they're going to call to find out about. Very important piece of information here. Okay. Now, what about this whole issue of references available upon request versus just listing your references? Okay. Most of the time, when we say references available upon request, not most of the time, a lot of the times, that's because the person that's applying for the job, the applicant, has not told their current job that they're looking for other jobs. Okay? So, what does that mean? Well, if they're really going to make it to the next round where somebody wants to call their references, they want to cherry pick those references to make sure that not too many people at their current job know that they're thinking about leaving. Okay? What's the other reason that you might do references available upon request? You need to hide something or someone. Okay? Now, I don't encourage that, but if that's the situation that you're in, then you got to think about that. Otherwise, generally, I don't see any reason not to list references. I just think that's a good idea. People get a good sense right away of who respects you and who will speak highly of you. Okay? Another thing that's important is to customize. Customize your reference list for the job. Right? If I'm submitting a resume for a consulting proposal, I don't want to list certain people for that. I want to list people that will demonstrate some skill in that area, or at least talk highly about my demonstrating some skill in that area. Okay? So customize those references. All right, let's talk about online resumes. This is a popular trend right now, right? List your resume someplace like LinkedIn or one of these professional social media type sites. Okay, this is fine. You most likely will still have to submit a traditional paper resume to the hiring manager. That's most likely. Okay? A couple of tips, though, associated with online resumes. Be careful about your online presence's security, right? Posting all of this information, your phone number, other people's phone numbers, and email addresses, these are not necessarily secure sites, right? So think about that, okay? Now, they're not getting confidential information about you that could lead to identity theft, but be careful what you're putting out there. Also, be careful with your online reputation, right? What kind of person are you online? What kind of things are you posting on Facebook? Watch what you post, comment on, like, follow, etc. Keep that in mind. Okay, and then the online resumes in general tend to be about marketing, selling yourself, right? That's really important. That's a lot of what it is. Okay, so summarizing the whole resume thing here, resumes in general are really, first of all, they need to be customized for the job. And second, the whole point of the resume is to show what about your experience sets you apart from the rest of the applicants. Okay? This is 100 people may apply for an open job. How can you set yourself apart from those people to the point that the hiring manager will call you for an interview? That's the goal. And we take that a step further when we talk about cover letters. So let's go into that. More to it. So, a cover letter should follow simple 3-paragraph format. Okay? 1 page, straightforward, to the point. Simple 3 paragraphs. Let's talk about paragraphs 1 and 3. Paragraphs 1 and 3, they get to be about you. Okay? In the first paragraph, you get to tell me how wonderful you are. Everything that you've done that's of great worth in your life. It's a good time to tell me what job you're applying for. That would be a really good idea. A lot of times people don't do that, right? Organizations have multiple open positions at once. Be sure that you let us know what job you're applying for. Third paragraph, summing everything up, reminding people to look at your resume again. A couple of summary points there. And a forward-looking conclusion in that third paragraph as well, right? I look forward to meeting you soon or to hearing from you soon, something like that. The second paragraph is the key. Because the second paragraph is about transactions, just like the rest of our world. So let me ask you a question. I'm going to steal this from the dean. He's going to recognize it when I start asking this question. So let's say that I am at my house and I need to run a cable line for cable TV from the back of my house to a room at the front of my house. So I run the line up to the front of the house, and now I need to do what with the cable line? I'm standing outside the front of my house with the cable line. What do I need to do? I need to connect it to something, and where is what I need to connect it to, probably?
Inside the house.
Inside, so I need to do what with the cable line?
Connect to the house.
I need to get it inside the house, right? So how would I likely do that from outside the house? Drill a hole. Very good. So let's say that I don't have a drill, which if you've ever been to my house and looked at my tool collection is very accurate. Okay, so I would go to M&D Supply to support Mr. Dyson and his family, and I would buy a drill. Do I need a drill? Is that what I really need? What do I really need? Say it again? Someone who knows how to run the cable. What do I really need from the drill? A hole. I need a hole in the wall, right? The drill is just a tool to get the hole in the wall, right? So this becomes a transactional thing, right? I need a drill to get a hole in the wall, to get what I really need. How does this apply to the professional situation? Hiring managers need an employee to get a job done for them, right? And they need somebody that will do so in the best possible way and might fit in with the organization's culture also. It might be somebody that they'd like to see every day for the indefinite future. Okay? So, life is about transactions. So how does this apply to cover letter? Okay, well, the second paragraph, that's where you show me that you know what I need and how you fill that need. Right? This is the key to an effective cover letter. An effective cover letter tells the hiring manager why you fill the specific needs of that job for that organization. Okay? The cover letter doesn't talk about you. The cover letter tells you how you give me what I need. That's an effective cover letter. Is that clear? Okay. One other tip on cover letters and resumes, be sure that you follow the application instructions, right? If it asks for a cover letter, send a cover letter. If it doesn't, don't. If it asks for letters of reference, send letters of reference. If it doesn't, don't. Right? The first group of people that get thrown into file 13 in the application process are the people who don't follow directions. Because what does that tell us about your ability to do the job? That you don't follow directions. Okay? All right. So follow directions. All right, so that of sums up, and this is a brief overview, right? There's a lot of literature and a lot of materials out there about resumes and cover letters, but those are some pretty good tips that probably will lead you in an effective direction, okay? All right, so let's talk about, let's say that your resume and your cover letter really impress the hiring manager, and you've got the interview. You've got the interview. All right, you're there. So you're going to go to the interview, and we need to talk about what you're going to do and what you're going to look like in your presentation of yourself. This is a good one. Shaking his head. All right. Okay, so a lot of times when we go to the interview, right, especially if it's one of our very first professional interviews, what do we feel like? Something like this, right? Oh my God, what am I going to do? What are they going to ask me? How am I going to answer their questions? How am I going to get this job? Well, we really want to feel something like this, a little more confident, right? All right, so how do we do that? Well, one approach would be fake it till you make it, right? Just show up and pretend like you're really excited about the job. But most really good managers can see through that. So then, how do we develop this confidence? Remember this? If you are confident, if you know that you fit the need of this organization and this open job, you should have no difficulty with confidence in the interview. Okay? So that's why it's important to make sure that you fit that need before you apply for that job. All right, so then let's talk more logistically about attire, right? Okay, what should you look like when you go for an interview? All right, so we're going to assume that you're going for a professional business interview, right? There are other exceptions to this rule, but assuming you're going for a professional business interview for an office job, gentlemen, you should wear a suit, you should wear a tie. Okay? If you decide that you should invest in a suit and get one that's nice and get it tailored, remember that that takes about a week, right? So you can't show up the night before the interview at Dillard's and say, hey, I need a suit for an interview tomorrow, because they're going to laugh at me, right? They don't have off-the-rack suits there. There are places where you can buy them, okay? But if you want to get one tailored, you got to give yourself time. Blue-gray, not blue-gray, blue or gray, right? Nice solid color or a simple stripe. Black is intimidating. Brown, okay, blue or gray is really the business suit color. Okay? Simple tie. Learn how to tie a tie, gentlemen. Okay? Learn how to tie a tie. Okay, sorry. Got to. And there's apps and websites, and there's no excuse. Learn how to tie. Okay. Simple tie, no loud patterns, very simple, conservative color, etc. Okay. Gentlemen, make sure that your socks match your pants, not your shoes. Okay. The socks are supposed to be the continuous flow of the pant. Okay. Just important things. White or blue shirt. These are business colors. Simple white or blue shirt. Shine your shoes. Talk about shoes one more in a second. Ladies, business suit, dressy top and skirt, something like that. Probably generally don't want to wear pants for a job interview. Probably not. Nothing too tight, of course. Nothing that's too low cut. Nothing that's too short. All right? Got to think about these things. Okay. Again, the colors, conservative. Blue, gray, brown, something like that. Again, black is intimidating. Bright is just not professional. So conservative for this type of thing. Let's talk about the shoes. If you can't walk in them, don't wear them. This applies for gentlemen as well. Okay? Yeah. Okay. Make sure that you get shoes that fit, that you can move in, that you're not falling all over the place as you walk down the hall. Polish them, shine them, make them look nice. Okay? These things get noticed. Okay, this is what a lot of times we all think that the front office secretary is like. Be nice to the secretary. Be nice to the support staff. A lot of times they're really making the decision, okay? Not necessarily. But a lot of times they're certainly funneling information into the ear of the people making the decision, okay? So be nice to those people, all right? Another thing, waiting. Let's say that you get to the interview early, or you get there on time and the people are running late. We don't want to walk out and find you sitting in the chair in the lobby. Oh, hi, how are you? No. Right? So what could you do? How about making conversation with the support staff? That might be a good idea, right? And remember, a good conversation is about you. I mean, is about you. Is about asking the other person about themselves, right? It's not about talking about you. Okay, another thing you could be doing, just reviewing your notes, reviewing your resume, making sure that you're prepared for the interview. That doesn't mean cram, okay? It just means you might refresh your memory there and use that time wisely. Okay, so again, looking professionally, being prepared, looking professional when they come to greet you as well, and being nice to support staff, important things. All right, so let's talk about the actual interview. Okay, so the first thing, the types, well, the first thing is this. This one is wonderful as well. I mean, who wouldn't hire this guy? This is great. All right, let's talk about the types of interviews that we might have. There's basically four main types that we can expect to have. The first is just the individual interview. This is your traditional, anywhere from half an hour to an hour and a half type interview. Okay? One-on-one questions from either the HR manager or the person that's going to be hiring you. Okay? We might also call it the personal interview. And let me see if there's anything. Yeah. And it's going to be a little more in depth as opposed to generalizations. The second thing would be a small group or committee interview. Okay, so this might be a number of people who are involved in the hiring process who meet with you as a group. Okay, the key here is that you have a number of decision makers in the group all at once, right? So you want to make sure that you engage each one during your interview. Make eye contact with all of them. Engage each one. Okay. It can be a little bit intimidating, right? Because you got a lot of people. You don't really know who's making the decision. So this is really important that you be prepared for this type of interview. It's more and more common. Usually you have an HR manager, maybe the person you're going to work for, and maybe their manager as well. When we did the interviews for the symphony conductor, we had 12 people in the room, I think. 12 people in the room, executive committee members. Okay, so again, being sure to engage each person. Another good thing is to know who each person is, right? Now, you may not find that out until you walk in the room, but whatever you could do, if you need to take a quick note, who is each person, what is their job title, as much information as you can get as quickly as possible to engage those people. Okay, the next thing we might have is a behavioral interview. The idea behind this is that we give you some performance test or some simulation of something that you might actually have to do to see how you might do. We did this with the conductors, right? We had them come in and conduct a concert, the finalists. Okay? We put them in front of everybody and said, here, show us what you can do. Some of them were good, some of them not so much. Okay? The one we got was great. Okay, so we're going a lot deeper here than just a conversation back and forth. We want to really see how you fit the need. We're going to find this a lot more in sort of technical, specialized type jobs. Okay, this is not going to be so common for somebody that's going to be sitting at the desk, answering emails and doing word processing. Okay. All right, and then the last thing that we might have is a task-oriented interview, which is kind of a variation on the behavioral one. So just an opportunity for people to do some problem solving or show us their decision-making skills. So these are all samples of interviews that you could have. So what might be some questions that you might get asked? What do you think? What are some questions that you have been or might be asked in a job interview?
Why should I hire you?
Why should I hire you?
What
What can you bring to the company? Is that what you were saying? Yeah. Hey, what can you bring to the company? What else?
are your long-term goals?
What are your long-term goals? What else?
How do you want to work here?
Why do you want to work here? Yes, sir.
What is your weakness?
What is your weakness? Yes, like I asked Jacob, right?
What are your strengths?
What are your strengths? Yes.
What you might know about the company, or
Yes.
where you're trying to apply it.
What do you know?
The product that you're trying to sell, what do you know about your product?
Right.
You know the specific of the business.
Very good. All good examples. And so some of the most common ones, and again, all of these are good, and some of them are not up here, but some of the most common ones, tell me about yourself. All right, I sort of started off with this one. Okay. Why are you interested in working here? Okay, we got that one. We got describe your worst and best boss. Right? This is an interesting one, right? The challenge with this one is to tactfully talk about your worst boss, right? That's the part that they're trying to figure out here. How ugly are you going to be about people that you've worked for and with before? Okay. So think about that if you were asked this question. What's your biggest weakness? An important one to be prepared for. That one is probably almost always going to show up. What was your greatest contribution at your last job? An important one as well. Where do you see yourself in 3 years? This is another one of those test questions to find out, are you still going to be here in 3 years, right? Okay. What ideas, talents can you contribute to this position or organization? Again, this is another one that shows that you've done your homework, that you understand what you're applying for and why you're here. And then give an example of anything, right? Okay. Look, interviews, like cover letters, like your confidence, like everything, is all about this. What can you do for the company? How can you fill the need that they have? I keep coming back to this because it's true. Okay? All right, so we're looking at personality, job fit. That's a lot of times what we're looking at. Right? This is an HR term, personality, job fit. How do you, as a person, fit the need that we have? And how does your personality allow us to think whether or not we might want to work with you forever? Okay? That's what we want to know here. Okay, so interviews are just not only as important for the company to find out what you can bring to the company, they're also important for you to find out whether or not this is really a place that you want to work, right? You're getting closer to potentially getting this job, and you want to get some information here to know if this is a place you might want to work. For example, anybody ever been to an interview where the boss comes in and says, "Hi, it's really nice to meet you. What's your name?" It's really nice to meet you, Taylor, and I appreciate your interest in applying for this job. Before we go ahead and get started with the interview, I just want to let you know that you'll be working directly for me, and about every 4 to 6 weeks, I just fly off the handle, start screaming and yelling at everybody, throwing stuff, maybe a stapler, whatever, trash can, whatever I can find. I just turn into a big jerk, and, that usually only lasts like 30 to 90 minutes, but then, for the next 4 to 6 weeks, you're cleaning up all the messes that I caused right then and there. So I just want to make sure that we've established that before we get started. Right? Wouldn't that be nice? That doesn't happen, right? When do you find that out? About 4 to 6 weeks into the job, right? Okay, so the interview is just as much an opportunity for you to find out what you may or may not like about this organization as it is for them to find out what they may or may not like about you. Okay, and interviewers often give us a way to do that, and it's in the form of this nice tricky question that always comes at the end. Do you have any questions for us? Any questions for me? Right? And so this is the place where you can learn about the organization, about its purpose, its values, its principles, the way it behaves that you can't get off of its website. A lot of times on the website we have espoused values, but in the workplace we have, what, for the test on Tuesday? Enacted values, what we really do, right? Which may be very different from the espoused values. Okay, you won't forget that one now next Tuesday. I want to make sure it's on there. Okay, things that you would not want to ask about in response to this question. Vacation. Yes, I'm very interested in this job. Thank you for interviewing me. How much vacation time do I get, and when can I start using it? Right? No. Okay? You don't do that. Okay? So vacation time, leave, things like that. Those are the sort of off things. You only need to ask questions if you need clarification or need more information, if you're just not sure about something, okay? But you should never leave this question unanswered. Okay? So if for some reason you can't think of anything else, a good question to ask is this, a good stop question here. What would be your expectation of my work in the first 6 months? This is a great question for them, right? You'll learn a tremendous amount about the people you work with and for and the organization in general if you ask this question. Once again, the only wrong answer is no. And the reason that no is the only wrong answer is because this is a bit of a trick question, right? It's a bit of a trick question because, once again, what the people really want to know is that you're enthusiastic, that you're interested. Right? Yes, sir?
Yes, another tricky question is, what if you don't really know your salary? I know that's a tough one.
Yes.
If you don't want to wait too many interviews into it, and you figure out it's a low salary, it doesn't fit your need, and then you waste your time.
Right. The salary issue is getting to be a more and more difficult one because so many organizations are just not posting the salary range. They do this commensurate with experience thing because sometimes they're trying to hire the cheapest So what is the answer to, or how do you address that issue? Well, it's probably not something you want to address in the first interview, but as you start to get closer, if you feel like you're really getting, you might get the job, that's when you want to start discussing it. I really would caution you, though, you have to balance it because you don't want to get so far along that that you've gotten the job and you've agreed to something that you didn't want to agree to in terms of salary. But usually the best time to negotiate that is after you've received a job offer. And the best way to really know is to have done your research ahead of time, right? You can usually get the salary ranges for organizations and equivalent positions if you can't for that one. So do your homework ahead of time. Okay. Very good. All right, so interviews, right? Knowing some of the questions that you might be asked. Knowing some of the questions that you might want to ask and being prepared for what type of interview you might have. All right, so how then do you get to the interview point? How do you get your foot in the door? Okay. So, a couple of tips to get a busy person's attention. To get a busy person's attention. First and foremost, write things so that it takes less than 2 minutes for them to read. Now, does that mean it takes them less than 2 minutes to read the whole thing? No. Give them some visual guides and cues on the paper that helps them figure out what you're trying to communicate, who you are. Okay? We use something that we call the inverted pyramid. The inverted pyramid means that you put the most important stuff, the base, right, at the top. The purpose, who you are, what you're trying to communicate. And then we start to fill in the details after that. Okay? Want to have a good headline or good subject line, right? You want to have a good lead. In less than 35 words, you should be able to tell everything that's important about this document that they're reading. Whether it's an email, whether it's a cover letter, less than 35 words at the beginning, you should be able to tell them everything that's important. Okay. All right, good. And then the inverted pyramid again. We want to balance up, as far as follow-up and after you've submitted information, we want to balance follow-up with being annoying. Right? We want to try to make sure that they haven't forgotten about us, but we don't want to be emailing them 2 or 3 times a day saying, hey, don't forget about me, right? Okay. Because that's a good way to not get the job, okay? So probably 1 contact a week after you've submitted some initial application materials is probably sufficient. 1 contact a week, just checking to see what the status of this is. Okay? If you get an interview, you might want to contact them a little more frequently. You might have to, right? Because you're trying to get that scheduled, et cetera, et cetera. And then after it's over, once again, follow-up contact back to once, maybe twice a week. They should give you some timeline for when they should make a decision. Here's a good one. It's always great to send a thank you note, right? It's even better if it's handwritten. This is a lost art, right? It takes time to sit down and write someone a handwritten thank you note and put it in the mail, find a stamp and put it in the mail and send it to them, right? So this is a really nice thing that you can do for people who have taken the time to interview. Don't email thank yous for interviews. It's just not professional. Even if it didn't go well and you're not going to work there, send them a handwritten thank you. Okay. So that is the overview of the interview process. All right, let's talk a little bit about personal organization here. This really does happen. I'm convinced that this is what many meetings, departmental meetings, are really like in the world, right? Okay. All right, so let's talk about how to have an effective personal organization system, okay? Effective personal organization really has to do with 5 things. Okay? 5 things. The first thing is to capture everything. Okay? I live by the general rule that I think I don't want to have a thought twice unless I like having the thought. So I write it down. Come back and evaluate it later. Right? Ask so-and-so about such and such. Write it down. An hour later I may say, oh, that's stupid. I don't know about that, right? At least I didn't lose it in case it was potentially meaningful. Capture everything that's of value. The next thing is you got to clarify, right? How many people in here have something that sounds like this on their How many people in here have a to-do list first? Let me establish that baseline. Okay, good. All right. How many people have something that sounds like this on your to-do list? Exam, paper, mom. Okay. Right. So when I look at those things, I go, exam. What does that mean? Exam. What does that mean, Danielle? Sorry.
Well, it depends on how organized you are. If you know that on Monday you only have one class, you know that that class is your exam. But if you end up having 4 classes on Monday, you don't know what exam you have on that day anymore.
Okay, right. But I'm not talking about calendar here. I'm talking about to-do list, right?
So study for it.
Okay. Okay. So that's what you need to do, right? Is study for the exam. So why didn't you write study for the exam? Because there's a subtlety here that's really important, right? There really is. There really, really is. From a psychological perspective, there's something that's really important. Okay? The subtlety is exam makes us look at that and go, there's a bunch of stuff I need to do about that, and I don't really know what it all is, and I don't want to think about it all, and I don't want to do anything else, so I'm not going to do it right now. Right? Versus reread chapter 1 notes, for example. I can do that, right? You see, the clarify part of this is getting everything down to pick up the phone and call the person, right? Open the email and send it. Because we can do those things, right? We don't have to think about them. When we have time to do stuff, we don't want to think about what we have to do. We want to have already thought about it. That's the key with clarify. So in order to do something valuable with that, we got to organize the results of this capturing and clarifying, right? You mentioned the calendar, right? You need to know which exam is when. How many people in here trust your calendar? How many people in here keep a calendar? That's sad that we have some people who don't trust their calendar. That scares me a little bit, okay? But maybe you'll get there, okay? But typically we trust our calendars because it's a system that has captured everything that's of value, organized it into clarified what it is, and organized it into a system that we know how to use, right? At 3 o'clock, I'm supposed to be here. You don't worry about those things, right? But you worry about what exam means on your to-do list. It's just a level of subtlety, but it makes a big difference when you got a lot of stuff to do. Okay, then we need to review all these things, right? You check your calendar when you got a bunch of stuff to do because you want to make sure that you don't forget to be somewhere that you're supposed to be. And the last thing that we do is we select the things that we need to do. All right, good. So, then, how do we plan effectively? All right, I need somebody to tell me the name of their 5th grade English teacher.
Miss Stafford.
Miss Stafford? Miss Stafford. Was she a nice lady?
Nope.
No. It's going to be even better.
detention in 5th grade.
Oh, that's sad. Okay, so this is going to be even better now because she wasn't a nice lady. So typically this happens in 5th grade. If it didn't happen in 5th grade, humor me for a minute here, okay? So what typically happens in 5th grade when we learn to write a paper, right? That's usually the first time we're going to write a paper of any substance. So what do we have to turn in with the paper, not the rough draft? What do we have to turn in before we do the rough draft? An outline, right? The outline. Okay. So the outline. First thing we got at the top of the outline is the thesis, right? Topic, sentence, whatever. What's the next thing at the top of the outline? I need the whiteboard, but I'm not going to mess with all that. What's the next thing at the top of the outline? Looks like this. Right? Roman numeral 1, right? Okay. So Roman numeral 1, that's going to be our major heading. Right? And then we're going to have some subheadings, right? What do we label those? A and B. Okay. So we have A. And then the fires of hell will be unleashed upon you if there's no B, right? 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 What are we telling people here in the 5th grade about planning? That in order to have one good idea, you got to have 2. They got to be of equal value. All right? This is really bad for planning. This doesn't help you. Okay, so what's a more normal way of looking at planning? Well, how about the way that the brain works? So let's take an example. Anybody going out to dinner tonight? Okay. Going out to dinner tonight. Let's say that you hadn't decided that already, but you decide now, hey, I want to go out to dinner tonight. Okay? So what's the first thing? You got to define the purpose, right? I want to go out to dinner for X reason, right? I want to see some friends. It's Wine Wednesday, Carrabba's. Right? Okay. I'm going to go out to dinner tonight. That's my purpose. Where are the principals going to be? Who am I going to invite? Where am I going to go? What time are we going to go? Right? We're just establishing the basic generalities of this dinner plan. So after we've established the purpose, then we have the vision, right? Where do we want to go? What do we want it to be like, you know? Okay. So we got to come up with a vision. The next thing we do is generate ideas. Now notice the important thing here. In the outlining example, where do we start? Here, right? Generate ideas before we know what in the world we're doing. How does that work? It doesn't. Okay? All right. The fourth thing that we have to do is take all the ideas we came up with and organize them. Then put them in an outline, right? Prioritize. Decide what's important and what matters. And then finally, then we decide what happens next. Okay? So if we take our dinner example, where might we want to go? What kind of food do we want, right? Organize all of that, and then go somewhere. All right, so 5 phases of workflow, 5 things that we need to do to capture ideas and be effectively organized. 5 ways, 5 steps in effective planning. All right, do you have any questions for me? Okay, very good. So, so there's a key here, right? Now, you didn't ask me any questions. But I close with my own content, right? And this is important for interviews, for cover letters, for follow-up. Okay? You don't ever want to give control over how things end to the other person. Right? So if I leave here on a question, then I leave with my answer to whatever one of you decides to ask me. If I leave here with this, I leave with my last piece of advice, my last piece of content for you. The same thing is true with interviews, right? You get to control that last question, because that last question is always, do you have any questions for us? So be prepared to control that so that you leave on your terms. That's it.